Well, here we are, the very first episode of a brand new show. What's it called? Tales from the Long Box. So essentially this show is just a little complimentary show to Comics Relaunched. I am Jake Archer. Aaron Fowler is not with me today. This is going to be sort of my thing. This is going to be sort of where I talk about anything I really want to talk about comics-wise. So if I want to talk about maybe review something or talk about some theories that I have about certain things that are going on in the comic book world. Essentially it'll be a bit like my articles on Tumblr, but they're not very popular, so I'm going to try and do something a bit different. Maybe YouTube is a better way to do it. So without further ado, let's jump into today's topic. So this week, which is the first week of March, which comics came out on the 1st of March, was the release of Superman 18. This is a big storyline, one of the first big Rebirth storyline for Superman. So there's Superman 18. Forgotten what issues of Action Comics is going to be, but the next 2 issues of Action Comics and the next issue of Superman will all tell a story of Superman Reborn. Just to get you up to speed, obviously at the end of the New 52, Superman died and was replaced by the pre-52 version of Superman, or so it seems. When we jumped into Rebirth, there was the pre-52 Superman found out that Clark Kent was hanging around. Nobody quite knew who Clark Kent was. Nobody still doesn't really know who Clark Kent is, but there's this mysterious Clark Kent walking around. Nobody quite... like I say, nobody knows who he is. But it seems to be tied up in this idea of Mr. Oz, who is a mysterious character who is stealing characters from the DC Universe, pretending for them to be dead. He's currently got Doomsday, he's got Red Robin. But yes, so what we've got today, I thought I would take the end of issue 18 of Superman. In the back of the book, they have the 6 prime suspects of who Clark Kent is. I'll just list them off for you. Bizarro, number 1, Mr. McPitlick, New 52 Superman, Martian Manhunter, Magog, and the Eradicator. Now I'm going to go into detail a little bit of each one, who they are, why would they be in this situation, and obviously what their connection to Mr. Oz could be, and why would they be after Superman and John. So just a quick brief, there's spoilers for issue 18 of Superman coming up. So in this issue, Clark Kent has followed Superman back to his house. Well, followed Lois Lane back to his house, actually. And finds out that Superman's there with his son, John, who has been told to Clark is actually the nephew of Lois Lane. Where we go from here is completely, utterly insane. So Superman answers the door, and Clark Kent has left a photo album on the floor. Picks up the photo album, and inside is a load of pictures of Superman, Lois Lane, Clark Kent, but no John Kent. There's pictures of Martha and Jonathan and Pa Kent, Mara and Pa Kent. There's pictures of ancestors of the Kents, and essentially all the Kents are there, but John's not. So, and what happens from here is that things start to burn in the house with blue fire, and eventually it leads on to John. And John starts to fade away. Superman grabs hold of him and is holding him, and John fades away in his arms. And that was the end of the issue, and Clark Kent walks off into the darkness. So this storyline is going to wrap up this Clark Kent mystery. Maybe not wrap it up, but tell us who it is. But so yeah, let's jump into the suspects. So number 1 is Bizarro. For those of you who don't know, Bizarro is a clone of Superman, kind of, depending on what version you've got. Originally he was made by a duplicate ray, and it went wrong, and then he used that duplicate ray to create Bizarro Earth, or Hatra, which is just Earth but spelled backwards, which was a cube, and had Bizarro versions of everyone on it. Bizarro, which is the Bizarro Wonder Woman, Bizarro Lois Lane, and also led to Oribzo. I can never pronounce it. Orizib, who is the smartest person on Bizarro World. who's essentially just normal human. So he comes to live on Earth eventually. But the last time we saw Bizarro was in the New 52. During the Forever Evil event, Lex Luthor had cloned Superman, needed something to fight the crime syndicate. The clone wasn't ready, so he brought it out, and it was Bizarro, or B-Zero at the time. What he was essentially Bizarro, the Bizarro we know and love, and he was built up as this character, this very fun-loving character who's very stupid but lovable. One of my favourite panels is hands a flower to Lex Luthor. It's brilliant. But he just follows Lex Luthor because it's his father. And he died fighting Bizarre at the end of Forever Evil. And Lex Luthor said, "Let's create a clone, but don't make it Superman, make it Bizarro." We also saw Bizarro in issue 40 of Action Comics, the New 52 run, which had Superman go to Bizarro Earth. And that could have been a parallel universe, we don't know. And then in the DCU area, there was a Bizarro miniseries that doesn't really fit in continuity. It's supposedly in continuity, but he sort of came out of nowhere. And then in DC Rebirth, he just appeared again, and he was normal Bizarro, and he works for Jason Todd, fighting Black Mask. I've not read that story, so I can't give the the details there. So how does Bizarro fit into this? Well, obviously he looks like Superman, and it could be the Bizarro clone that Lex Luthor was building, and maybe Mr. Oz got hold of it, and maybe we're moving into that. But what is really interesting about Bizarro is he's stupid. So how is he this Clark Kent that's walking around ridiculously stupid? Or has Lex Luthor mastered this and made him the perfect Bizarro clone? Personally, I don't think it's Bizarro. I think that's a bit of a cop-out. It's a bit of a waste of time if it's Bizarro. Anyone can make it Bizarro. So yeah, next up is Mr. Mixyet-Pitalik. I'm just going to call him Mixie for this thing. Mixie is an imp from the 5th dimension who has reality warping powers and always fights Superman in cartoonish, ridiculous ways, and always has a bit of fun with Superman. It's always fun when Mixie turns up, because you'll hear that. The way to beat Mixie is to trick him into saying his own name backwards. And if you watch the latest Supergirl over in Britain a couple of weeks ago in America, Mixie was a character in that. Doesn't look like that in the comics. In the comics, he's a small, impish character, whereas in Supergirl, he's just a normal guy, but with reality warping powers. And they had a lot of fun with that. I would recommend watching that episode. It's a brilliant episode. But yeah, in the Crisis era, they made him a bit more limited, so he would go on his own accord. So once he'd done what he wanted to do, he would leave. He once tricked Superman to paint his face blue, and then left. Bit of a weird story, but fun. It's always fun when Mixie turns up. Now, Mixie in this scenario makes sense powers-wise. His powers are reality warping, so the idea that he can make John disappear and reveal to Superman that his old life, without John, is quite an interesting take, and kind of makes the main sense. And someone has escaped from Mr. Oz. In the beginning of the issue, someone's escaped from Mr. Oz. It could easily be Mixie. It could easily be someone else later in my list. But as of yet, Mixie is the character that probably makes the most sense. That's this Clark Kent. Moving on is the New 52 Superman. Now, the New 52 Superman, what can I say? It was a rough ride, the New 52. Still not quite over it. But Superman in the New 52 was a lot younger, a lot less experienced, a bit more moody. And obviously when in the DCU era, he lost his powers. Well, kind of. He lost the majority of his powers and was sort of put back to the Max Fleischer days, the Joel Shuster and Jerry Siegel days of Superman, where he was just sort of super strong, he could jump really high and could run really fast. But So he lost his powers, and then in a fight with Vandal Savage in the Savage Dawn crossover, regained his powers, but with a cost. These powers, essentially, he threw himself into kryptonite as a form of chemotherapy to break down the dead cells and then rebuild his new Kryptonian cells, and it worked. But by throwing himself onto this kryptonite, essentially it was killing him. So he went around trying to find a new replacement to Superman, trying to get all these people to build up and become Superman. Talked to Supergirl and several other characters. And then he died. He exploded. Beside him were Lois Lane and Lana Lang, and obviously that led into Superwoman. If you've been, again, highly recommend reading all the Superman titles from Rebirth. They've all been really, really strong. But so it would be a drag if it turned out that Clark Kent was the New 52 Superman. He was boring. He was a boring character. A lot of people during the New 52 went off Superman, and it was hard to find new Superman fans because he was so dull. He was so, oh, I'm Superman and I've got problems, and but yeah, you know. So Superman New 52. The reason this could work is that Mr. Oz, in the very early issues of Superman, returned to Clark, our Clark, pre-52 Superman, and said, the Superman of this Earth and you are not what you think. So it could be that he's a different being, and it could help to explain this massive difference between the New 52 Superman and the pre-52 Superman, as it's supposed to be that those two universes were never separate. So that could be an interesting take. It would be a shame if it was the New 52 Superman, though. Next on DC's list was Martian Manhunter, which is possibly the most surprising character to appear in their Prime Suspects. Martian Manhunter, obviously the last son of Mars, a telepath, shapeshifter, plenty of other powers as well. He can fly. He's got laser eyes. He was a counterpart to Superman in a way, and obviously was used as the Superman counterpart in Trinity War. He was to fight Superman if they ever got in a big fight. So Martian Manhunter, last time we saw him was at the end of his run during the DCU era, which was brilliant, written by Rob Williams. And in that he fought a Red Martian called Ma'afa-Lefa'ak, I think. I have no idea how to pronounce it. But yeah, and then he just sort of disappeared. And he has not been seen since. He was briefly seen in a panel in Rebirth. But other than that, he's just gone. Which is a shame, because I like Martian Manhunter. I think he's one of DC's strongest. If you play him right, he can be a really interesting character. And that could be where he's been. He could have been captured by Mr. Oz, and he could be sent out. He could have escaped. Why he's currently acting shady and evil, I have no idea how that would turn out. That's for the writers to explain. But obviously he is a shapeshifter, so he could have got stuck in Clark Kent's ways, or maybe Mr. Oz is manipulating him, or something of that grandeur to lead into this. As much as I'd like to see Martian Manhunter back in the DC universe, I don't think this is the way it's going to happen. I think it's just, let's fill in these 6 boxes of characters that could possibly be Clark Kent. Martian Manhunter's a shapeshifter, put him there. Next up is Magog. Now, Magog was the villain, pseudo-villain of Kingdom Come. He was built up as this new hero, killed the Joker for killing Lois Lane. But it wasn't until Justice Society that he joined the main universe. And he was the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, great-grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, and he touched a stone and got his powers, the old Gog, and he got in a fight with the god. He died in Generation Lost, post-Brightest Day, or during Brightest Day, when Maxwell Lord convinced him to kill himself, after being convinced, Maxwell Lord convincing him to kill Captain Atom, but obviously he refused, and he killed himself. Not been seen since. I think he was teased in something recently. Might have been teased in the back of Action Comics at the end of the Men of Steel arc. If I remember correctly, he appeared there. So it could be Magog. He does sort of look like Clark, but obviously there's loads of different things in the DC universe they could explain the why a character that doesn't usually look like Clark suddenly looks like Clark. The idea of Magog, though, sort of comes out of nowhere. There's no real build to it. While this is the same with Mixie, as he wasn't really seen in the New 52 era, he was in a couple of side issues of Action Comics. But Magog, who knows? It could be Magog. I think that could be a left field play that they do. Now the last suspect that DC had was the Eradicator. Now the Eradicator was created back in the 90s as part of the reign of the Superman travesty, and was a ancient Kryptonian robot that is all about protecting those that are Kryptonians. And Eradicator played a massive part in the opening arc of Rebirth Superman. Essentially, he didn't like that John was half human, half Kryptonian. He downloaded himself into a body that looks exactly like Clark's, and they fight. Superman and Eradicator, they fight to the death. And there was a cool bit with Batman's Batcave on the moon. It's always fun when Batman's got a ridiculous Batcave. But, so, the Eradicator, the last time we saw the Eradicator, he died. Essentially, it looks like he died. But, with Red Robin, with Doomsday, it's hard to take the death of any character seriously. And with Captain Boomerang, granted he wasn't taken by Mr. Oz, but he came back to life pretty quickly. It's hard to take death seriously at DC in a minute, because they could all just be with Mr. Oz. So Eradicator could be this escaped criminal. It wouldn't match up with the timeline to when Clark turned up, because if Superman and Action Comics are sort of going concurrently, Clark's really been there since the beginning, or at least since the end of the first arc. I think it was the first issue he turned up at the end of. And so yeah, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense of why he's Clark, but he could be involved in some way or another. Now, they're the 6 that DC in the back of this latest issue of Superman said that they was probably the character. But the wording was very interesting. They specifically used the word prime suspects. All I think when I hear the word prime and DC together is Superboy-Prime, and this has been the theory of the internet since the beginning. Superboy-Prime was last seen, I want to say, at Infinite Crisis, and he was brought over with Alexander Luthor from Earth 3, with Earth 2, Lois and Clark, and went crazy, and they all had to fight him. Obviously, he was in Sinestro Corps War, he became a Yellow Lantern briefly, and he's just a psychopath. He essentially just became a psychopath. Obviously, he looks exactly like Clark Kent. He was the Superboy that went to the future and joined the Legion back in the Silver Age. So it could be that this somehow they're bringing back Superboy. The idea that the whole thing of Rebirth is the pre-52 universe and the new 52 universe was never the same thing, could bring in Superboy-Prime. And again, he might punch a hole in the universe. He might have punched another hole in the universe somewhere and brought himself back to life. I don't know. Superboy-Prime is usually used as a plot device. But yeah, so they're the suspects. And it's an interesting group. So I think that the one, powers-wise, the one that makes sense is Mixie. Eradicator also makes a lot of sense, except for the time displacement. Unless they just easily said that this was set, the first arc of Action Comics was set after the first arc of Superman. But again, Superboy-Prime makes a lot of sense, and it could be that they've put these 6 suspects there just to throw everyone off the trail. So there you have it. That's pretty much all I've got to say on this topic. Maybe we'll come back to this, because apparently we are supposed to find out who Clark is in the Action Comics issue of the second part of Rebirth. Part of Superman Reborn, sorry, not Rebirth. The idea of Mr. Oz, maybe we'll talk about who that could be. Really, I've only got one theory, which is Ozymandias. Makes the most sense. It's got the name Oz in it, and the Watchmen stuff. But yeah, stay tuned to this little show. Please tell me who you think it is in the comments below. If you're on iPad, subscribe over here, that one. And if you're on laptop, subscribe down there. And I hope to see you again soon. Please leave some comments. Find us on the Facebook, find us on the Twitter at Comic Relaunched. Let us know what you think. So there we go. Superman, round 2. Here we go.